Good morning. This is Damon Scott, Marketing Director here at Pleasant Valley Business Solutions, BBBS. And I want to thank everyone for joining us on our introduction of Microsoft Dynamics NAV for government contractors. So today we're going to be providing an overview of the Microsoft Dynamics NAV for government contractors, which is a fully integrated business management solution. So today's presentation is going to include a look at the executive dashboards, as well as the fully integrated web time and expense system, project setup, including billing setup and managing funding, invoicing and invoice formats, and managing indirect rates as well. So a little housekeeping first. This webinar is being recorded and it will be posted to our PBBS YouTube account later today. If you have any questions as we're going along, please post those into the question section and we'll try to get to them as we're going through the webinar. If we cannot get to your question, we will contact you separately. Later today, you should also receive an email invitation to take a post-webinar survey. We would really appreciate any feedback that would help us make this a better learning tool for everyone. So please take a minute, answer a few questions for us. We really do appreciate that. Okay, so for today's agenda, it's going to include a brief introduction about PBBS, and then we're going to jump right into a demonstration of the product. And again, if we're able to, we'll answer questions as we go. We do encourage you to ask questions. This is for you, obviously, to get an insight into the tool. So we do want to make sure that you ask questions that you have. Let's see. So about PBBS, we are a top-tier Microsoft business solutions provider, serving only the government contracting market. Headquarters are just outside Washington, D.C. in Reston, Virginia. It gives us a unique access and insight into the GovCon community. And as an experienced leader with over 12 years of success in the government contracting market and an intelligent innovator with Microsoft systems, PBBS is a direct resource to both government contractors and the Microsoft community. Now, the Microsoft Dynamics NAV for government contractors by PBBS is a rich, robust accounting solution, compliant with federal rules and regulations, and provides complete integration and ease of use. PBBS is driven to develop excellence in providing the most comprehensive solution to our customers and our partners, our partnership channels as well. So with that, again, as a brief introduction about PBBS, I'm going to turn this over to Mr. Paul Skursky. He is our founder and VP of Sales and Marketing. Paul, welcome, and I'll turn things over to you, sir.
All right. Well, thanks, Damon, and good afternoon to everybody on the phone today. Just going to fill in a couple blanks from Damon's initial presentation, give you a little insight into Microsoft and the marketplace. Then we're going to actually get right into the software. So I've been involved with Microsoft Dynamics NAV for 15 years now. It's been around for about 25. And the solution is in use today by over 110,000 companies worldwide. And it's over 1.7 million users now. So very wide user base. It's Microsoft's #1 product for mid-market companies, and in fact, it's the most widely used business software product from a financial perspective for mid-market companies across any vendor. So it's the #1 solution in the world for mid-market accounting business software. All right, so Microsoft, they do everything through partners. So that's Microsoft's model. It's been their model since the start. And what you're looking at here is Microsoft's vertical strategy for Dynamics NAV. And you can see that on the left-hand side, there's a box for government contracting. And really, that's what we bring to the table for Microsoft. And Damon had a slide previously that talked about the whole idea of certified for Microsoft Dynamics. And what that means is the things that we've done to improve NAV around what a government contractor needs is actually tested and certified by Microsoft before we incorporate it into that base solution.
We'll jump right into the demonstration here. And I think we have a poll question first of all. While you're getting that set up, I'm just going to do a quick poll survey to our folks on the line here to find out what system they are currently operating, whether that be QuickBooks, Deltex, or other Dynamics, or some of the other systems that are out there.
And we'll just give folks another few minutes to get the question answered. And looks like we've got about 95% of the people have voted. And on today's call, we've got a little over 50% that are running Deltek today, about 20% on QuickBooks, and about 10 to 12 on another Microsoft Dynamics product, and looks like almost 20% on other systems today. So we got a nice mix of companies that are on the phone today, and now we're going to go ahead and get the presentation started here. So let me go ahead and I'll show my screen here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start out with a general overview. And what that's going to incorporate is to give you an idea of the breadth of the application. So for any folks that haven't seen Microsoft Dynamics NAV, the first time they see it, they're very impressed with the depth of capabilities that the application offers. So I'm going to start out with just a 10-minute general overview, and then I'll go through what I call a day in the life, and it'll encompass the things that Damon laid out. So everything from executive dashboards through time and expense and billing, and then we'll get into some of the indirect rate management components as part of the application. And as Dan mentioned, if you have questions on the right-hand side in your panel, you'll see a spot to ask questions, and we'll answer those throughout and then cover the majority of them at the end. What you're looking at right here is the home page for Microsoft Dynamics NAV. And what Microsoft went to about 5 years ago is this whole idea of a role-tailored client. So the idea is based on your role in the organization, you're going to have a home page designed a certain way. But as an end user, you can also tailor that user experience, and I'll show you some examples of that. So I'm logged in as an accounting manager, and I'm seeing key activities that I'm responsible for performing or overseeing. Things like invoices that need to get created, expense reports that accounting needs to process. In this visual stack, you can see the quantity. I can drill into that. So there's one expense report that accounting needs to go ahead and take their last step in the process on, and you can see that here. So I can see the details of what was on the expense report, quantities and amount. I could look at the approval process it's gone through. So it's already been approved. In this case, it's a 2-level expense report approval. I can see who approved it and when, and also pull up any attachments related to that particular expense report. We're going to enter an expense report later, but the idea was to show that concept of a visual cue of activity and then the ability to drill into it. There's different charts you can place on your home page. So Microsoft has designed some different standard charts that you can make available as an end user on your home page. You just select the chart that you want to view based on what your role is in the organization. In addition, integration with the different Microsoft components. So I'm going to show you a couple of the integration pieces. This one here is showing my Outlook. So as a user, I would still be leveraging Outlook, and you don't need to use the full Outlook Microsoft Exchange. It can just be the Outlook component. But I'm seeing my mailbox, my calendars, any open tasks. And as a user, each one of those little tiles, you can tailor it. So for instance, if I don't want to show my mail, I can go ahead and hide that. Now my view has changed a little bit. Over on the right-hand side, I call this the My section because it's an area where someone can manage a subset of a master list. So in my demo system, I probably have 50 different projects. These are the 4 I go to in most every demo. I put them on my home page so I can quickly get to them. So by double-clicking, it launches this job record. And when I go through the day in the life, this is where we'll start, to show you how projects are set up or jobs. Over to the right, while I'm here, I want to touch on the status box because it's something that's a little bit unique. The idea is there's information on this record that you might want to see on a regular basis. I could run a report, like a project status report, to get some of it, but this is giving me an online view of that data. So everything from contract and funded value through AR balance and billings, I can just choose the measure that I want to analyze and drill into it. So this is going to be real-time data, and then when I drill into it, I see what comprises, in this case, that balance of $8,000 in AR. So when I drill into it, it takes me to the subledger for the customer to show details on AR, specific to this project. So it's filtering it for just project 1002. I can see all the entries, and there's 5 open AR entries that came from invoices. I can see not only the original amount, but how much was left. So in this case, there was one invoice that was partially paid. I can drill into that, and it shows me that, yes, we originally had an open AR entry for $1,600. We applied a $1,000 payment to it. I can look at the details of that payment by hitting Navigate, and it's going to show me information about the bank account that money was deposited into. It's going to also show me details on the customer and GL side. So what's great is if you've got questions about a particular transaction, you can drill into it and get those answers by drilling down and navigating across the application. When I go to the department list, this is going to give you some insight into the breadth of the application. And I know that we've got a lot of companies on the line today in varied industries within government contracting, because government contracting actually covers a lot of different NAICS codes, a lot of industries. So to give you a sense of what the system can provide in terms of capabilities, for all of our clients, financials and projects are at the core. So financial management, GL, AP, AR, fixed assets, sales order processing, purchase order management. We've got a lot of clients that actually resell products to the government or manufacture products for the government. So as a reseller, you might just use the product contract side, but if you're actually storing anything, you might need to use the warehousing capability. And as an organization that manufactures goods for the government, there's a full manufacturing suite that's available to you. We've got a really deep client base on the project side. So these are professional services businesses, and that's where project accounting comes into play. So that's where we're going to spend the majority of today's time, is around projects, managing contract and funded value, billing, etc. But just know that there's other capabilities for companies that have different types of business needs. And we're happy to set up a one-on-one presentation to go through those things. And we also, on a regular basis, have presentations on the product side of the application. So this is kind of the core business software, all the different modules incorporated. And I guess I left off HR and payroll, which are also available. But we integrate with some of the leaders in the marketplace around HR and payroll. The second thing we're going to go into today is the time and expense system. So this is going to be strictly browser-based. It's the place where all employees can go to enter time and expenses or purchase requisitions, and then approval of those type of documents. So we'll go through those general functions, and we'll actually set up some examples for you on how you would leverage that component of the system. The final piece is going to be around reporting. So you're going to see that every module has a series of reports. So everything from, on the project side, AR by project reports, funding notifications, job status, job revenue summary, utilization reports, floor check and missing hours reports, along with a series of financial reports that are available to you. In addition to all the reports built inside the application, there's also what they call analysis services or data cube technology. So the back end of the system is SQL Server and allows us to build some pretty sophisticated reports. So those reports can be built inside of NAV, or we can connect to the data cube and you can access it via other front ends. So in this case, I've got some Excel examples where we've connected to the data source and actually displaying that information via Excel. So I'm showing you right now a series of different project dashboards. So everything from your income statement by project, which is like your PSR, labor analysis reports, direct cost analysis reports, and we'll pull up a couple of these so you get an idea of what they are. This labor analysis, it allows me to choose a project, a range of tasks in a period, and it's going to show me details about hours that have been charged by individual. In addition to the hours charged via the timesheet, you can look at also hours that have been charged in the timesheet but not processed in accounting yet. So it can show both unposted and posted hours. The GL detail is going to show you all of the direct cost components and indirects related to a particular project or range of projects and tasks. So very easy to filter on that data. And then my personal favorite on the project side is the project spend report. And what this is doing is it's combining information regarding the project status with funding burn. So you can see the details when I choose, again, a project and a range of tasks. I'm seeing top-line revenue for those selections, all of my operating expenses, including indirects that have been allocated, net income or loss, then also what was the spent. So that's how much was the funding that was used in that period. And you can see when I select any of these cells and I look up in my formula bar, there is no data that's been keyed in. It's just looking back to that data cube, looking at, this case, a measure called total spent, filtered by the criteria we've identified here. So it really helps to get people more engaged with their data and provide one truth of information, because this is all feeding off of that same database. Up in the top right-hand section is the burn rate. So this is the details of how much funding is being used every month. And then based on the average of the last 3 months, the system calculates how many months of funding should be left on this particular project or range of projects and tasks. So that's a little idea of some of the dashboard reporting, whether you use Excel or another front end. And then there's also a set of financial views. So everything from a business overview to balance sheet with key metrics, income statement, cash flow, and then different indirect rate views. So the idea here is to get information into people's hands in a format that they're familiar with and they understand. And you can also build your own views because a lot of people understand Excel. So those are just some general components before we kind of get into the day in the life.
Yeah, a question came up, and it's a good question here, as far as if you can elaborate a little bit more on the technology about the data cube, but maybe some people are more used to pivot tables, but the data cubes, if you could explain that.
Sure. Absolutely. So like I mentioned, the back end of the system is SQL Server, so that's the database. So different than some applications, this is not a file-based system, it's database-driven. So SQL Server is the back end. SQL Server has a service called Analysis Services. And Analysis Services is a data cube technology. And what it's doing is it's taking information from the database itself, which includes both the time entry, project, and financial data, and it puts it into a data cube. And the best way to think about a data cube, and I'm going to open up another sheet to give people a sense of how it works, is that there's certain measures within the database. And what we do is we define those measures, and those measures are then leveraged in this data cube. So what you can see is these are examples of measures. So job budget information, so budgeted hours, labor costs, material costs. So these measures are predefined versus someone having to make connect the different tables. They're all connected, and then these measures are predefined. So job ledger data, so AR that's current, AR that's 30, 60, and 90. So instead of someone having to write a query that determines what does AR 30 mean, it's all predefined. So it's built into this data cube using Analysis Services, and then these measures are ones that we worked with clients to determine what are the typical types of information you want to report on. And now whether you just leverage it as a pivot table or you can use some of those predefined sheets that we have. And for the individual that asked the question, we can also provide a little bit of light reading material on it to explain some of the details there. All right, so now let me get into the day in the life and talk a little bit about projects and how they're set up and some of the capabilities there. So I'm going to go into one of the projects. We'll go into project 1002. One of the things that you're going to see is the look and feel is going to be the same across the entire application. So some of the capabilities I talk about, like we talked about the drill down idea, it's going to be the same throughout the system. So in this case, on a particular job, this is the internal job number, description of the work. Anytime you see this little caret down, it means I'm looking into a list. So I'm pulling from a list of my customers, and it's filling in all the relevant customer data. You could also have multiple contacts for this customer. So in this case, Department of Defense, we might have 5 or 6 contacts. In this case, we've got 2 contacts. You can select the contact, and then that would be your technical point of contact on this project. What type of client it is, who is the project manager, what type of project. So this one is at the top level, a cost plus fixed fee, the period of performance, and then some other information that's available from a reporting perspective. So now once I set up the General tab, on the Contracting tab, this gives you information about the contract side of it. So what was the primary contract number? So for folks that might have a GSA schedule or you're on Seaport E, you would assign the contract here, and now the system dynamically knows that any work being performed under this vehicle, I'm going to roll it up, and if someone wants to see things at the contract level, they can do that. Contracting office and paying office on this particular project. When I go to the Posting tab, this is information regarding billing, revenue, and some of the main costing setups related to this project. So in this case, at the top level, information about revenue recognition, the billing formula side of it. Billing pool group is related to the indirects. What's the indirect structure for this project? It could use a corporate structure, or you could have an overall unique project structure. The fee percent, any type of information about fee amount or withholding. In addition, this is kind of the think about it is this is the top level of the job. Underneath that, we've got what we call the work breakdown structure and task orders that sit underneath the main setup. Let me talk a little bit about some of the information that we're going to track here. So within the WBS, it's a 60-character alphanumeric field. It's going to show you information regarding not only the WBS itself, but any CLIN or acronym that it maps to, and then details regarding contract and funded value of that particular level. If you want to see the detail that's behind this 3.5 and 3.3 million funded for setup on this project, I could look at the Modification Detail screen. This is going to show me the history of all mods to this particular contract. So if I had an additional mod, there's a function called F8 that allows me to copy, or I could just type the whole thing out, and I can identify when did this modification happen. So maybe the mod came through on the 6th of May, and then I'm going to identify what was the impact in terms of contract and funded value. If it was just a change to the POP, I could leave these 2 blank, and maybe the description would be, mod to POP. So you can identify the details of what's there. In this case, let's go ahead and we'll add $200,000 to this particular contract, and it's fully funded. And now once I accept the change here at this WBS level, you're going to see that the job gets updated. So it went to 4.8 and 4.6 million. And we go back to that work breakdown structure, you're going to see the details that it already created this roll up to 3.7 and 3.5 million. So you enter the detail of the mod, the system automatically manages that roll up for you. So there's nothing that you need to do there. In addition, you're identifying if these charge codes are for labor or non-labor charges, in terms of expenses or requisitions. So it helps to reduce errors by limiting where you can see these particular levels. Membership is where you're identifying who can actually charge to these. So you're identifying teams that are available to charge to the overall project. So that's kind of a little bit about the structure. You've got the contract at the top level. Below the contract, you've got the job. Underneath the job, you've got details about the WBS and the task order levels within this. A little bit about the task orders. More and more we see complex contracts that combine multiple types of billing and revenue. So what I mean by that is you might have contracts where your labor could be T&M or fixed price, but the material side of it could be cost reimbursable. So you're able to, at the task level, identify how you're going to bill and recognize revenue. So the system supports hybrid contracts and rolling those together onto an invoice. So at this point, we've set up the top level of the particular contract. So that's our contract. Underneath that, we've got this individual job, and then below that is the WBS structure. So this is going to give us the details regarding this particular project. The next thing that oftentimes people are interested in doing is identifying what is the budget for this particular job that we're working on. So I can identify what resources are working on it, identify the number of hours. So in this case, I've got Andrew, Beth, and Joe that we've assigned to it, and then I can identify how many hours we're planning to budget for those individuals. So I can enter the hours by month, but I can also enter the hours for 1 month and then copy it out over multiple months. So if you wanted to do a 1-month budget and copy it the next 11, the system will make those entries into the next month. It's going to also look at the number of available hours per month to identify, based on the ratio of the first month, how many hours should be in there. So if May is a 150-hour month, this means that this person, Beth and Joe, are 0.5 FTE. So the system on the outgoing months would use that 0.5 FTE. So just some tools to help automate and really make that budget entry process a little easier. In addition, there's also import-export from Excel option to get data out of and back into the system.
Hey, Paul, we have a lot of questions coming in. I'm just going to touch on a few. Some of these are a little bit off-center, but 2 questions came in. I think we can answer both of these here. One is, can employees be members of more than one team? And can you budget individuals by week as opposed to by month? So I'll let you answer those.
Yeah.
We got a lot more coming in, though.
Yep. So we're going to hold some of them to the end. Damon's going to cover the ones that are
a little bit more
specific to that area where it makes sense. But to answer the questions, you can definitely budget by week. It's just a different view, so I'd select by week versus by month. And then the other question was regarding multiple teams. Yeah, so you can have as many teams as you want and assign people to multiple teams. So you'll have that flexibility there. So that was a little bit about a cost-type project. Let me get into a T&M project, and then we'll cover some areas around time and expense. So what you're going to see is on a T&M, the general tab is very similar. The information captured is pretty much the same. Same idea on the contracting tab. And then on the posting tab, you're going to have different revenue and billing formulas. And behind these are just codes. So these are the default codes, but for our more complex clients, these billing and revenue formulas can be defined by the client. So that gives you that flexibility to handle unique contracts that have been negotiated by your business development team. Once I've set up that main structure, we talked a little bit about the WBS. For a T&M, it's different in that you're billing your labor based on predefined rates by labor category code. So where that's found is in the setup, under resource prices, we've identified in this demo example for 2025, that's this project, whenever I'm on a project and I select one of these setup pieces, it automatically filters it. So it's only looking for projects 2025, and you can see the labor category code and effective date and what the bill rate is by that labor category code. So if I wanted to see just the project management labor category code, let's filter to that value. So now you can see in my demo system, we've got this is like a long project here, it goes out to 2042, but you can see that escalating T&M bill rate. If I wanted to send this data to Excel, I can use the send to Excel function, and what it's going to do is it's going to actually take that data, put it into Excel for me in the exact format that it had inside the accounting system. So you can see the details of it here. There's actually a Dynamics NAV tab in Excel that allows you to refresh that data. So if Damon entered some additional information, I could refresh it, and it would pull in whatever the latest information is. If I wanted to make an entry in Excel to add some additional rows, I can do that. So we'll just add 2 more rows. And now if I want to copy those 2 rows, I would hit Control-C, and then we're going to go back into NAV, go back to that same spot. And now if I go down to the bottom, I can just go ahead and right-click and say Paste. And now it's going to take that data that I actually entered in NAV and copy it. I entered in Excel and copy it back into NAV. So it actually does all the validation. So it's going to make sure that this is a valid date, this is a valid labor category code and project. The price, as long as it's a number, it's going to accept it with a certain number of decimal points. So it makes it easy to take data from Excel and put it into any list that's like this, or a ledger inside of NAV. So they've made it easier to share information between those 2 applications. Now, once I have the particular bill rates identified, then I want to take my resources on this project, and I can assign them to a labor category code in the project, because their corporate labor category code might be different than the project labor category code. So in this case, let's go ahead and let's filter out who are the PMs on this project. So we're going to again filter that value. So you can see these are the 3 individuals that are project managers on 2025. And you could have somebody assigned to even multiple labor category codes in that project by assigning by job and WBS, in case you have somebody that performs 2 roles on one project. But by doing this, 1, you're able to enter the rates in the future, so you don't need to worry about remembering to go back and update it, even if it's in the middle of a time sheet cycle. And then I'm assigning resources to the particular labor category code in that project, so the system knows the proper bill rate. So it really helps to automate and ease the burden of managing T&M type projects. So that's a little bit about project setup. And I guess one last thing we'll get into before we go over the time and expense side is this whole idea of alerts, because I think companies more and more are trying to be proactive. And what this allows me to do is I can identify, so we'll just say for this overall project, I can compare either the spent or funded value and then identify where I want to alert somebody in the organization. So I could say when spent compared to funded hit 50%, send a project manager an alert on this. I could also compare, go ahead and add another alert. I could compare the billed value to also the budgeted value. So you can use any one of the combination of these 2, spent or billed compared to funded or budgeted, and then identify at what percent we want to trigger that alert. And that's going to send the alert off to potentially a PM, task manager, or you can just key email addresses into there. I just want to do a quick explanation of these different terms. Billed, budgeted, and funded, we've kind of explained those already. Spent is a little bit of a new one. And what spent does is it looks at planned bill amounts that haven't actually been processed yet. So it'll encompass everything we've billed, plus what we've spent to date to compare it to the funded or budgeted value. So again, a more proactive measure to get information into your PMs and operations hands so they can make good decisions on projects and people. All right, so before we go over to time entry, we talked a little bit about some of the integration with the different Microsoft components. So everything from exporting data to Excel to the look of Office on the front page. And then I guess one other thing to mention is every one of the reports you can actually export it to Excel, PDF, or Word. So Damon, I think a great time to get an idea of the folks on the phone, who's leveraging some of those Office tools already.
Yep, so just launched a questionnaire real quick here, just about what Microsoft products your company is currently using. What are you familiar with? Excel, SharePoint, Outlook, or Office 365. And As expected, a lot of folks on Excel, a lot of folks on Outlook, SharePoint in Office, pulling up the rear though.
All right, so it looks like we've got, we'll give it a few more minutes to get some other folks to get in for voting here. It's about 70% have voted. All right, let's go ahead and let's close that poll down. And what we have is on the call, interesting, 100% are using Excel today. And I should say have used Excel. Office 365 is a growing product. Over 40% of companies are using or have used Office 365. A little over 50% with SharePoint, and around 90% for Outlook. So I think we've got some folks that have invested in Microsoft on the phone, and that's kind of one of Microsoft's key value propositions, is that you get more out of your investment that you've already made with Microsoft. So, you know, now once we've set up projects and we've assigned these teams and defined the billing rules, now let's talk a little bit about, you know, recording time and expenses and going through that whole process. So while we're over here, I want to touch on a couple of these screens that are available or processes. The first is related to your PTO balance. So each user can look up what their balance is, and the PTO calculations are specific to the client. So you can define your own PTO rules along with, you know, what are the PTO categories that you accumulate for. So it'll do the accrual entry for you, along with identifying the number of hours available for individuals. PTO request function. This allows a user to request time off, so that they would just go in and select when they need the time off. And then the reason why there's a job in job WBS is because even for indirect, you know, like PTO, there's a job set up for that. So everything would use a job. It just makes it easier for people to think about. So they would select, you know, the PTO job, and then it would send an email off to their approver, and the approver can approve or reject that time off request. If they approve it, automatically goes in the timesheet. If they reject it, the requester would get notified, and then they can just identify why. So they'll get an email back from the approver of why it was rejected, you know, and then from there they can have some discussions with their supervisor. So now, you know, PTO, the function for that, there's also a favorites option. And what favorites allows you to do is, as a user, if there's some projects that you charge to most every pay period, you can just create your own list of favorites. Then what's going to happen is when you open up a new timesheet, it's going to fill your favorites in. And then what you do is you go to the day that you worked. So maybe today, this morning, I had 4 hours on this Operation Morning Light project. And I can put comments against that I can see, and also my approver can see. And then maybe it was 2 additional hours on this project Kempster. And then I just save my time. That's what I'm going to do on a daily basis. At the end of the timesheet period, I'm going to go ahead and submit my time, and then this is going to be my electronic signature. So once I hit OK, it's going to go ahead and optionally inform my approver that there's time that's been submitted and it's available for approval. And now my timesheet is locked down for me to change it. There's also controls in place for things like time entry in advance. So if you try to enter time in advance on certain projects, it's going to let you know that it's not allowed. And then if you make a change to a previously saved cell, it's going to require that you put a comment in there. Those comments are tracked in 2 different places. So I'm going to go back into the accounting system for just 1 second. And what we're going to do is from WTE reporting. So if I go to my employee timesheet, no, wrong button. I want employee timesheet. What you're going to see is there's 2 different cells for comments. The audit trail would be the one for the government. So if the government wants to see timesheets with any changes, you would select audit trail. Comments would be the comments that the employee made, like the one I made about that report being completed. So both are captured and both are available to be shown on a particular timesheet. There's also reminders that can be set up. So within the business rules, you can identify things like email notifications are available and what type of and that could be sent at a particular time. Also, ended timesheet reminders, expense report reminders. So, but now you can, leverage some of those timesheet reminders and expense report reminders to all employees. So that takes us over to expense reports. Let's talk a little bit about creation and management of expense reports. So to create one, I would just hit Add New Expense Report. Identify the period of time that I traveled. So maybe it was from the 13th through the 18th. Description of travel. So we'll say travel to Texas. If I received an advance, I could enter the advance. I click Save, and now it creates my expense report header for me. From here, I could just add the lines in terms of any charge codes. I could also use the per diem wizard. So I'm going to go ahead and use the per diem wizard and explain a little bit about how that works. So I would go ahead and select where I traveled to. So if I go ahead and choose Texas, it's going to then show me the different destinations that are available in Texas. So I can either select or type. So go ahead and we'll select Goldthwaite, Texas, and that's in Mills County. Click Next, and then what period of time was I there for? We'll just say I was there for the whole trip from the 13th to the 18th. Was it for any particular job? I'm going to choose the job in WBS that's related to for it. And then what type of expense code? So we're going to go ahead and choose the lodging code, and for meals, choose per diem, click Next. And now it shows me the grid. So if breakfast was included with lodging, I could uncheck that, or maybe the government provided lunch on a certain day, I could uncheck those components. If I click Next, it's going to give me what is the lodging ceiling. So in this case, maybe the room I stayed in was only $75 a night. Room tax was $5. It's going to identify what that total amount is. If I went over the ceiling, it would go ahead and move that into an unallowable account that you could then still track. And if you can get that unallowable amount approved, they could go ahead and flip it to an allowable cost code and document Y. In this case, we're just going to go ahead and click Finish. And now what you're seeing here is the details of the expense report. So everything from the lodging tax, my first day meals and incidentals at 75%, and then the middle days at the full 100% on the MI&E. So once I complete that, go ahead and save it. If I had any type of attachment, I could attach the document. And what you're going to see is this whole attachment concept is available throughout the system. So on any master record, you can have attachment. And I'm just going to go ahead and drag and drop this. And then what it does, it takes that particular document and associates it with the expense report, and then it drops it into SharePoint for me. So that's one of those areas where it leverages SharePoint in terms of how documents are managed. So it takes it off my desktop and actually puts it into the expense report in this case. So then we'll go ahead and submit this, and then once I submit it, it's going to trigger an email to the approver to review that expense report and actually approve the document. So a few things happen on the web, and now let's go back into NAV and show how that type of information is impacting the NAV side. So since we were just finishing expense reports, I'm going to go ahead and close off that piece before I go off to the labor side. Let's go ahead and you can, from a search perspective, up in the top right-hand corner, I can search throughout the application. I can also use the main menu to search things. So I'm going to go ahead and go to the expense report, and let's go to the bottom one here is that travel to Texas. And I see all the details of what's here, including that attachment that was assigned to it, and then where we're at in the approval process. You can see that there's 2 people that need to approve it, but that status is still at a submitted status. It hasn't been actually completed yet. Once it is, then I can go ahead and turn this into a purchase invoice, and it'll create the payable to the employee and then hit the project and the general ledger. So I don't need to rekey anything. All the information is captured through the data entry by the employee, and then it's used throughout that process. So now let me touch on the labor side of it. That gives you a little idea of entering expenses in that process. So now from a labor perspective, let's go into our time journal to talk about once that labor gets approved, how do you process it? So your folks are entering time. The first thing you're going to do at the end of your timesheet period is run the missing time report. System supports multiple timesheet periods, and you can also have multiple timesheet periods within the same company. So I'm going to go ahead and just bring in my time. There's also an option for a floor check. So if the government's, go ahead. If the government is coming in for a floor check, you can run it for a particular date. And then you can run this report to see who's missing time or waiting for approval, so you can get an idea of what both of those are. When you go to print this, you can print it to PDF, Word, Excel, or also one of my favorites is actually I can schedule this report. So maybe I want to schedule it for 8 a.m. so when I come into the office, this thing is already printed out for me and available. Or I could just have it on my home page and actually run that report. So now once I've done that, I've completed that task of chasing folks down. Then I would bring the time into the journal here. And then once it's in the journal, now I can run labor distribution against it. So this is going to calculate based on effective rate or standard rate. We've also used some forms of diluted hours, but it'll bring in the details of what is the labor cost per hour for each individual on here. I can look at the individual's detailed journal, but to see it in total, I'll just run this time journal summary report. Go ahead and preview this to give you a sense of what's on there. And let's make it a little bit bigger. So it's going to show a summary by employee. So for each employee, it's going to show the details of are they salaried or hourly, what is the rate for this timesheet period in terms of what they're getting paid, the projects that they charge to, the total number of hours, and that amount, which that labor distribution calculated. You're going to see a detail of the project summary, and then we can see details regarding benefits and any type of GL impact. So again, same type of export capabilities there. Once you complete this function and you realize everything's accurate, the last step would be to go ahead and post it. I guess before you post it, one thing I forgot was payroll. So whether you use a payroll service, so our strategic partners are ADP, Paychecks, and also Payroll Networks is a local payroll provider that we share a lot of clients with. So you can leverage an outside payroll service, or there's a payroll module built into the application. So once you've completed that step, then you post it. And that act of posting, as we showed in that report, it's going to hit at that point general ledger, project ledger, and the resources individual ledger. So now we've captured all the costs. Now let's go through the function of some of the month-end billing activities. So before we get into billing, let's talk a little bit about our indirect rates. So we're going to go into the cost pool setup to talk about the indirect rate structure. So within the system, as it relates to indirect rates, this piece is as simple or as complex as your business. In my demo example, I've got a fringe, 2 overhead pools, both for company and client site, and a G&A pool. So I was on the phone with one of our clients last week and talking about their incurred cost submission. So we've got a tool to help with schedules A through H today. It actually builds it out in Excel. And this client had 44 pools in their setup, so both final and intermediate pools. So we've got some complex clients with very complex indirect rate structure, and we've got clients with a simple structure. So system supports both concepts. In terms of the setup here, what's going to happen is there's going to be 4 steps to the setup. So step 1 is you define what your rate structure is in terms of what are the pools. The key here is when you look at the sequence number, the only real requirement, and this is both for your final and intermediate pools, the only requirement is the sequence defines what step happens first. So in my demo example, I've got a fringe pool, and a portion of this fringe is going to get loaded into overhead and G&A. So in that case, fringe needs to come above overhead and G&A. So anytime you have a service center, that service center has to happen before those costs are allocated into a final pool. So that's step 1, is I'm defining my rate structure. Step 2 is for any one of these pools, for any one of those pools, I need to define what is in my pool and what's in my base. So in this example, my overhead client site pool, when pool is checked, it's telling the system that I'm accumulating costs within a range of accounts for that pool. When I select it, you can see it's a code. There's a code called overhead accounts in this demo environment. If I want to look at the detail of what's in there, I can actually look at the details for this overhead pool, and what it is the range of my overhead account. So once you set that descriptor in terms of what overhead accounts are, you can use that in many different places. You can see examples of things like labor, ODCs, so it makes it easier to build those pools. And then once I define my pool, I can define what's in my base. So in this case, my base is my direct labor with fringe applied to it. And then I'm identifying what departments are participating in this pool. So in essence, that's the math of how I'm calculating that pool. So that's the first 2 steps. I've defined the structure, how I accumulate costs. So in addition to both GL accounts, you could also have non-GL accounts. So whether it's labor hours, square footage, head count, those statistical accounts can also be leveraged as your base. So once I've defined that part of the setup, then I'm defining how this allocation happens. So once I've accumulated the cost, what happens to it? Does it actually go out to projects? And when it does, typically we're doing it both actual and provisional, or with those intermediate or service centers, those costs are accumulated and then put into another account to be later picked up. So that's step 3. Then the final step is related to your indirect rates as it applies to billing and allocation. So in this case, for this pool, I've got a provisional rate effective January 1st of 2013, which was 50%. This can be used for billing from a cost reimbursable perspective. Then once you have the final rate, this would be used for that invoice true-up and also allocation. So you're going to see the history of your rates, both provisional and final rates there in the system. So from a monthly perspective, once I've set up those pools, then I'm just going to run that function to allocate those costs. So it's just a function that you're going to run at the end of the period. I would just choose the period I want to run it for and either use final rate or provisional rate. I can also schedule these to run. So instead of running it during the day, I can run it off hours, and then it's going to go ahead and make those entries both in the general ledger and the project ledger. And I'm just going to go over to the GL to show you a little bit about how those are going to look. So let me go into my chart of accounts. And I don't see it on my home page, so I'll just go ahead and search it. So go ahead and pull up the chart of accounts, and let me go down to my indirect section. And what you're going to see is, go ahead and expand this a little bit. You're going to see that for my overhead to company site actual, that there's 2 entries in here. So it's an actual entry and then the offset. So those costs were accumulated above within my overhead accounts, and then we've allocated out that $37,000. If I drill into that, it's going to show me all of the particular transactions. So it shows me, what was the base, what was the rate, what project, task it went to, and then as I go over to the right, it gives me the amount. So all the math is involved, or I should say included in that description, so I can see the details of what's there. So the last part of the month-end process we'll go through is we're going to talk a little bit about the billing process. And let's go back and we'll open up one of our projects. And I guess before I do this, I think we've got one last poll, and then I'm going to cover this last step, Damon. So let's go ahead and...
Sure, absolutely. There's a question here that I'm launching. We'd like to know what's important to your organization as far as the automation concerned, reporting, automation, compliance, integration, others. And we are getting a lot of questions in. We do want to try to get to this, and we're running short on time. But while we're doing this, one of the questions that came in, Paul, I'll let you answer this. The question was regarding the DCAA compliance and the updates, the system being fully compliant, and how do we update if DCAA makes changes?
Yeah. So I guess the first thing to say is that, compliance, there's things that we do to help you be compliant. You still have to have documented policies and procedures. If there was some type of change that impacted, whether it's the FAR that changed, there's something that was changed regarding accounting systems, we provide regular system updates, so that would be incorporated in that system update if there's something that impacted compliance. So I guess just to close out this poll, and then we've got just the one last step, and then we're going to cover all the questions we can, is it looks like, there's a lot of interest in automation. 30% plus said automation was the key piece. Integration, 25%, compliance 20%, reporting 13%, and 7% other. So, it seems like automation and doing more with less, is a theme that's still important today. So I want to take you to the last step, which is the billing step, and I'm going to just cover one example. What you would do is you would run the function to create the invoices. It creates what we call an invoice proposal, which is like a worksheet. So this is the place where I'm going to review it and make sure that it's accurate before we're going to finalize it. So, invoice example gets created. There's different ways you can print it. I'm not going to go through all these today, but I'm going to go ahead and print it by resource name, and I'm not going to subtotal it by task. We'll just go ahead and preview it. So now, let me make this a little bit bigger. So it's going to obviously be your logo. I just added ours during the break there. So it's going to be information about the client, the contract, the details regarding labor. So in this case, it shows the person's name and labor category, but there's different ways to show that. And then our other direct costs like material and travel, the burdens, because this one's a cost plus, what's the fee, any withholding, total for the invoice, total to date. These invoices can be sent to Excel, PDF, or Word. I can reprint them whenever I want. I can also have them approved. So I can actually send this off for approval, and then the PM gets notified. They get the document sent to them so they can actually approve that document. And once that document is approved, it becomes a release document, and then finally it becomes a posted document. And that posted document, the great thing is, you can print it as many times as you want. We've had a lot of clients that they have problems because they can't reprint documents, so they always have to save them. You can reprint them as many times as you want. And in many different formats, you can also email them right out, including if you needed to print it off on a 1034, 1035, that's available for you. So we've got a couple minutes for questions because we don't want to hold people over.
We actually have about 1 minute, Paul.
1 minute. All right. So, and we're going to follow up with the questions via your contact information. So I'll cover a couple of these quick ones here that I see that came in earlier. Can you provide details on the level of CRM integration to CRM Online? So what there is Microsoft's got an integration toolkit. It provides a base integration. So integrating like your customers in NAV with accounts, and can also integrate the invoice data. So, and you can have it either in a hosted or on-premise. So that one's a little more detailed. So the individual that asked that, we're going to follow up with you on that. There was a question about Microsoft Project. We can't show it today, but this can work with Project Server or Desktop. And the last one I close it out on is it says, can you provide some guidance on implementing NAV for government contracting when part of our business is government, some percentage is non-government or commercial? And I would say that, you know, that is a sweet spot for us, is companies that are both federal and commercial. System can support both. And then in addition to that, if your business is both products and services, another area that we can really help you. So I know we jammed a bunch of things in there at the end, but one, we really appreciate your time, and we appreciate the feedback. Like David mentioned, we're going to send out a feedback form.
Right. And, you know, again, we do appreciate your time. We did run a couple minutes long. We have questions to answer. There's about 15 more questions to go through. We'll touch on these directly. Do you want to invite everyone back out to our website on the events page? We do have other webinars that are available. If you would, if you're interested in getting more information about our product or information in the government contract community, we do have a lot of webinars that are available to you. And we wish everyone a great day. Thank you for attending.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.